All right, welcome to another edition of Zoom into Wine and Learn About Wine's Stars of Merlot. We've got an incredible audience joining us tonight from all over the land. We ship to kits everywhere, and I'm super excited to have you all. And thank you for my team for pulling it together. We filled over 100 kits with Merlot and sent it high and low. So we're really excited to have you all with us. I'm a professional educator, sommelier, winemaker, and my family has a wine store in Los Angeles called the Merchant of Wine. And keep things rolling along. Every Wednesday we do a Zoom. And if you enjoyed tonight, I hope you'll come back and join us again. Thank you all for your patience as I played a little Adele video for those of you that were on hold. It's a new video that came out today. You just never know what that does for the wine category. I certainly would have been loved to have been the brand that she was throwing around in the bottle. I don't think she really disclosed that very much, but there are people and agencies that you pay a lot of money to get your wine featured in an Adele video. But that's another business, another time, another conversation. Tonight we're going to talk about Merlot. And there's a reason that we wanted to promote Merlot. I believe in the diversification of wine. I believe that there are so many different great grapes that we need to understand. And things can get a little out of balance once in a while. There was a time when I was selling wine, I would be out in the marketplace, and this is in the late 1990s. I would have to call into the distributor to find out how many cases of Merlot I had available to sell that day. That's how out of balance things kind of got at the peak of the Merlot craze. And anything that goes up that high and that wild, there was a time too when Merlot wines actually cost more than Cabernet wines. That was pretty crazy, and certainly things kind of changed. We certainly saw what Sideways did to the Merlot market. Of course, that's not exactly what we could point to, but it was kind of about that time that Merlot sales really turned down the other direction, and those that are making Merlot today are making something really beautiful. I think it really cleaned up the business of Merlot and in a lot of ways wine. And tonight we're celebrating Merlot, and we're going to taste Merlot versions from many different places. And we've got some great talent on the Zoom with us tonight to talk about these Merlots and the difference that a place can make. And when we finish up tonight, we've got wine number 6 in the jar. That is a blind Merlot that I sent out, and you can taste it, and we'll talk about it then and figure out where it's from. Some people got the VIP bottle kits, and that Merlot is packaged up. Be very appreciative if you'd keep that bottle of wine to yourself and allow everyone else to try to figure out what that Merlot is. If you keep the wine below that wrapping, you can play as well. But we're going to taste a lot of different wines from a lot of different places. So let's get started. And we're going to start off up in Arroyo Seco, a brand that's from Santa Lucia Highlands. And the brand is called McIntyre. And I'd like to get them on the Zoom with me right now. Who's joining us from McIntyre tonight? It's great when we come together. Steve, it's so good to see you.
Yes, Ian, thank you very much. Yeah, the screen said that the host was not allowing us to unmute, and I was pushing the button frantically, but finally it worked, so thank you.
Well, that may be something that we did, so I apologize.
Well, thank you for hosting this event. Really appreciate it.
It's always our pleasure, and it's great to have the best in the business get together and talk about wine, and we're just super appreciative that you are here today with us. And if anybody else has a problem with that unmute situation, we'll figure it out. But I'm going to go right into Steve McIntyre's presentation with wine number 1. And we've got a little slideshow to help guide us through. and talk about the wine. So take a look at wine number one. We got the little jars for you guys out there. We poured those on Monday. We fill them all the way to the top. It acts like a really nice decantation that will probably last until Thursday or Friday. I'm tasting from a mixture of bottles that I Coravined and also some that I pulled the corks on. And the way the wine ages in those little decanters is optimal. There's almost no air in there, and the wines are really showing well. So pour yourself there or open up those bottles if you've got bottles, and let's begin with Mr. McIntyre. And Steve, how long have you been in the wine business?
36 years.
Phenomenal. And you guys farm a lot of land. Like I heard a number today, I think it was 1,400 acres.
Well, it's another zero. We're actually closer to 16,000 acres right now.
Wow. As
Yeah.
a farming company, that's so you're doing it for other people as well.
Yeah, we sell to 60 different wineries. The farming company is the tail that wags the dog, and my, making wine is something that I've done for a long time, and we really got into it commercially back in 2005. And Merlot is the chip on my shoulder because I started out making wine as assistant winemaker at Hans Smith and Hook back in 82, 83, where we struggled in that cool climate to make Cabernet that didn't taste like bell pepper. And finally, we discovered rather, that Pinot Noir and Chardonnay did much better in the Santa Lucia Highlands than Cabernet or Merlot. So, but that bug never left me, and I decided to try like heck, and we have succeeded in finding a place in cool climate. It's out of the wind. That's the key. The wind is such an important component of our terroir. It's out of the wind. It's a little warmer. We don't hang a lot of crop on it, and we don't water it much. And as a result, we can consistently make Merlot that is not herbaceous. And so I've achieved one goal. Now I'm going to try it with Cabernet in that same location.
Well, fantastic. And we are talking about your this map that's coming and divulging itself to us right now. It's going to show us your home ranch, which is in Santa Lucia Highlands.
Right.
And that's that's a Pinot Noir and Chardonnay vineyard. How far away are the Merlot vineyards from this site right here?
As the crow flies, they're 7 miles south, and they're tucked around a corner where the Arroyo Seco River comes into the Salinas Valley. And that's how we get away from some of the wind. It's more of a breeze on the vineyard. And the vineyard is called Kimberly Vineyard. It's named after my wife. It's the gift that keeps giving each year. That didn't cost me much. So that's the site that is raising. They were raising Cabernet and Bordeaux varietals on.
I see. And so that became the project, is to get that vineyard to produce the type of fruit that you could be proud of.
That's right. Yeah, and consistently produce the type of fruit where we can be proud of.
Mm-hmm. Excellent. And what are some of the things that you had to do to enhance the quality and remove some of that vegetal character from the wine? That's probably what you're talking about, right?
Yeah, if you go into any vineyard, Bordeaux varietal at 19 bricks, it's going to taste like bell pepper. And that is the pyrazines is the compound responsible for that particular flavor. And then with time and heat units, and a good diurnal type of environment where it's warm during the day and it gets down into the 50s at night, a good shift in temperature, you can retain acidity and get the grapes ripe enough and have enough time frame to have the concentration of those compounds come down to a level below the threshold. The pyrazines come down to a level below the threshold in which most of us can taste them. And that's what, by the time the grapes are ripe, that's pretty much gone or missing from, or very subtle from the end product. And then of course irrigation is critical. When we first started, we don't get a lot of rainfall. Now we don't get any, but usually we get 13 inches, and that's not enough to grow a wine grape and go dryland farm it. We can dryland farm, but it's really hard on the vine, and so we generally just irrigate the Merlot when we get a hot spell. So we keep it hydrated during a hot spell, especially if it's going to be a long duration, and that'll take care of the vine's needs. And it allows the vine to concentrate on its progeny rather than its green tissue, shoot growth and leaves and such. So that's the key, is to get the vine 3 weeks before veraison to transform and to transition rather into concentrating on its progeny, the seed and the grape.
Beautiful. Well said. Very, like a statesman. That was a wonderful comment there. So you found a sweet spot, and now you're producing a Merlot that you've got your family's name on.
Mm-hmm.
And tell us about your wine and what are you doing to make it McIntyre?
Sure. Well, this is 100% Merlot. We do have another wine that we make that's a blend of Merlot, Malbec, Petit Verdot. But this 100% Merlot, cool climate, and we're minimalist in terms of winemaking. Like a lot of folks, we don't add ML, bacteria, or yeast. We let the natural flora and fauna ferment unless we get a stuck fermentation, which generally doesn't happen in this vineyard. And we like to let the grape speak for itself. So the oak regime is puncheons. They're a little larger vessel than a barrel. And they are generally 40 to 50% new French oak in any given year. We're keeping it in there for 18 months. So subtle winemaking production type nuances to the wine, but letting the grape really kind of shine through, which gives us in that location a little lower alcohol, which tends to help the wines age pretty well. We've been making them since 1999, and we're real pleased with how they're aging. And it also gives us that red fruit, which is different than maybe a warmer location would. The higher tones, a little bit better acidity and a lower pH than we might get in a warmer climate or microclimate.
Okay, very good. And you said Kimberly Vineyard was something that you were able to acquire or did you build this yourself, or was it something you took over?
Actually, we planted it in 97, and we're still farming it today, although it looks like we've got enough leaf roll virus in there. We're going to have to replant the Merlot. So there may be a couple of years where we're going to another site, a canyon further south that we like. So the vines are now 26 years old, 26 or 27 years old. They're on their clone 181 for us cork dorks that are interested in that, which is a clone that does a little better in a cool climate than some of the other clones. That's become important. And we didn't know that back in the 90s, but we certainly do now.
And in 30 seconds, you said leaf roll virus. Can you just mention how is that propagating? Is that airborne? Is that from pruning? How is that moving from vine to vine?
It's moving by a pest vector, vine mealybug. And we didn't understand when we first got vine mealybug that it was different than other mealybugs and could spread this virus much more prolifically, because this vine mealybug will grow and survive in the soil as well as up in the vine. And so we had an economic threshold, and now that we realize that it spreads leaf roll so effectively, we have a zero threshold for vine mealybug. And so our new iteration of vineyards in this area will utilize that particular program that a lot of table grape growers actually use to prevent the spread, or at least severely slow the spread of leaf roll in the newer vineyards.
Well, it's a big issue for the wine industry, and every decade or so there's a new one.
Yeah, right.
This is the one that's puzzling us all right now.
Mm-hmm.
And took out my Petite Syrah vineyard a few years ago.
Oh, yeah, sure. Yeah, anytime people see that red leaf, that's not, and a vine that's entirely covered with red leaves, that's not right. That's virus. It could be leaf roll or it could be red blotch, but I know it's pretty, and people go, oh, what a beautiful vineyard, but it prevents the grapes from ripening, and it severely can reduce production as well.
Yeah, and especially if the whole vineyard's green and you've got a couple of vines that are red,
Right.
you really see it. You got some problems there.
Mm-hmm.
Now, this is the Kimberly vineyard without the probably in the dormant part of the year,
Right.
And what kind of soils are we looking at here?
They're chular gravelly loams, so they're alluvial soils from a granitic base that washed off of the San Lucia Highlands mountain range into the Arroyo Seco. Now, there are places in the Arroyo Seco that have more of a greenfield potato. That's a river rock that's round. We call them greenfield potatoes. And so that's been washed. That's a river type of wash. But we're up on these benchlands where there tend to be alluvial that have washed out of the actual soils in the mountains behind us. And I would be remiss if I did not mention in the picture there that you see my good friend Byron Kasugi, who's our consulting winemaker. And the older I get, the more I believe in winemaking by consensus. And so we've got a good group of folks that we get together with, and that creativity just seems to blossom when you get a bottle of wine and a bunch of folks together.
Outstanding. Well, here's technical data on your 2017 Merlot, which is what we're tasting today. And it's nice for a cooler climate Merlot like this to come from a vintage that's a few years older. Your daughter and I were talking earlier today, and she loves this wine with about 4 or 5 years, and probably has some with that type of structure that it's in.
It's too velvety. Do you?
Yeah.
Somebody says cherry skin smoke and velvety.
Yeah. Bob, you're talking over me. Sorry, Bob. I had to mute you. If you go off mute, just make sure you say something to the winemaker, which I'm going to encourage everyone to do. Go ahead there, Steve. Take it away.
Yeah, it's 4 or 5 years seems to be the sweet spot for release of these wines. Any sooner? Well, I attribute that to my wife, actually, because she doesn't like Merlot that's less than 10 years old. Although she's drinking this one, so either her palate is changing with time, or she's getting a little easier. But and we're really pleased with how these are aging. But I do think the pendulum is shifting away from the higher alcohol, picking at 26 bricks, to getting back down to 24 or 25 bricks, so we can get these alcohols, 13.9 or 14 rather than any higher than that. The wines do seem to age better.
And 2022 is in the books for you?
It is. That heat spell we all went through in September, it wasn't so much the intensity as it was the duration. We're going to have to change some of the things we're doing out in the vineyard. We're using more shade cloth on the afternoon sun side of these vertical trellises to protect these dark berries from absorbing so much heat. We're needing to keep the vines a little more hydrated. In the after veraison, used to shut the irrigation system off, but I don't think we're going to be able to do that in the future, and weather these heat events that seem to be coming at us more often.
Really, really interesting. Shade cloth seems to be something a lot of people are exploring.
Yeah.
And how long have you been using that?
We've been using it on one vineyard over 10 years, our home vineyard, because the road direction is not ideal. It has too much afternoon sunside exposure for Pinot Noir. So we have about an 18-inch panel that we put up on the afternoon sun side, and the other side of the vine gets a piece of bird a cloth, or the bird netting, and that keeps the birds out. And then the shade cloth is a white reflective cloth, and so it's put up right after veraison. We don't have it up all the time, and it's lasted quite a length of time, and we roll it up and reuse it each year. Oh, there's great picture.
Well, I just think it's so great to be able to talk to people about what we're talking about, not leaving behind.
Mm-hmm.
You know, these are the type of pressures that the wine industry is under with global warming and some of the answers that we come up with. This is a potential answer right here. A lot of work.
Right.
Putting out that shade cloth doesn't. It's miles of cloth too. That's got to be an expensive investment. But I'm hearing about it every day now, and so
Yeah.
it's quite interesting.
Yeah, if you can roll it up, that cloth will last. We've got some that's 12 years old and it's still being utilized. So
Well, fantastic.
thank
Thank
you.
you for being here. We do have an auction. I'm going to put that auction link in our discussion box right now. Can you tell us a little bit about the auction item, or do you want me to read it? Because you may have walked in on something I didn't verse you on, but each one provided an auction lot.
Yeah, I walked into something that was Kristen's. So
Sorry, buddy. Yeah, I'm like, oh, maybe he doesn't know. But yeah, you've got a magnum of McIntyre Family Wines Estate Pinot Noir, Santa Lucia Highlands, on the auction lot. And our charity supports Children's Hospital Los Angeles. We've been doing it for a long time. We've raised over $650,000 for
wow.
Children's Hospital. And we continue to do it in little teeny ways with the support of the wine industry. So thank you for the beautiful wine that'll help us get a little closer to our $1 million goal. And I'm just going to paste into the chat box the auction link. There's only a couple of items out there today, but everyone's welcome to bid and bid often. The auction will stay open until Friday at noon. So bid early and then come back and see if you won. Getting outbid is just like raising money for the charity.
Great. That's wonderful, Ian.
Thank you so much. It was great to have you here again, to see you again, twice in 1 year.
Likewise.
And I'll have to get up there myself and shake your hand.
Please do. Be fun.
Thank you so much, Steve. So as I said, we do these often, and the McIntyres were really kind and did Zoom with us earlier in the year. We actually celebrated Santa Lucia Highlands with a Zoom and just took a look at what's happening in Santa Lucia. And the McIntyres were big stars in that particular event, as they are tonight. So I'm very thankful for all of you being here with us. We have the 6 wines to try. We're going to try to stay as close to we can to about an hour and 15 minutes on this. I'm already running pretty late, so I'm going to ask my vintners to help us, but we don't want to rush it. And I love the questions and comments, and I love to be able to kind of talk about shade cloth or whatever else is out there that helps make a better wine audience reality. So and if you guys have any questions about anything anybody says, put it in the chat box. I know Mr. McIntyre will take a look in the chat box and try to answer people and comment back. And Steve, make sure you copy everybody on that message. It went to me, and I thank you. But it was great to see you again. All right, we are now going to leave California for a moment, and we're going to go north to Washington, where we're going to taste the wines of Jay Bookwalter. And very excited to, I'm sure for some of you, this will be your first time tasting with John Bookwalter. But I hope it's not the last, because I love this wine and I want you guys to try it with us. It's called Conflict Red. And John, welcome.
Cheers. Thanks for attending this evening on a school night, as we say.
Absolutely. I keep on talking to me, John. I'm trying to pull you up on my screen here.
Sure, no problem.
Okay. And one more time. There you
One
are.
more time. There we go. You there?
Yep.
I'm sitting low on my chair. I'm not very tall. I better get we're still on a phone book next time, so I look like I'm over 5'8".
No, we just wanted to make sure everyone got a chance to see you and not my face just constantly coming back up. So I'm going to remove my spotlight, and there you are. And tell us about your project in Washington, how you got started, and take us through the slides.
Sure. I'm gonna start with Washington, because I always feel that it's tough to talk about wines, the wine that you're producing, unless you speak to the region in which you grow in. And having done this for the commission for years, I always say there's the big four in Washington. If you want to know anything about Washington, these are the four things that you should remember. And then you can go out and do this speech for me anywhere around the country. But we like to say it's all about the parallel we get to grow grapes at, the lack of water, the diurnals, and then our soil. And those are the big four. And let me speak to each one real quickly. So a lot of people, the misperception in Washington is that we grow in the shadow of pine trees, because everybody thinks of Washington State as Seattle, because that's most people's experience with Washington State. But like you see on the leeward side of any great mountain range, and ours is the Cascades, there's typically a desert. And this holds true pretty much around the world. On the west side of Washington, you have a rainforest in the Olympic Peninsula. Seattle sees rain year round. You have the North American snowfall records in the Cascades. And then there's not much left when we get to our side of the hills. So as I said earlier, in today's earlier Zoom meeting, we've had not even 3 inches of cumulative rain and snowpack this year. So one of our driest growing years ever. Typically for us, we see 7, 9 would be a flood. So it'd be quite a bit. So I always mention that because lack of water is really one of the keys to growing actually Merlot, because it's naturally a fairly vigorous variety. And for us to be able to control the water allows us to control the vigor and drive the vines, maturing the grapes, and referring to what Steve said, the progeny of the grapes. The parallel which we grow at is the 46 parallel, as I say, and you can see that on the map on this illustration here. The 46 parallel, you wrap it around the world, you intersect some pretty other famous vineyard locations or regions. That is, you have northern Bordeaux, southern Rhone, you see, and even Piedmont. So it's not uncommon to grow this far north. And what that does allow us to incur is this diurnal, and Steve mentioned it. It's really one of the more important elements in growing great grapes and wines, and that is the shift between high and low. That's what diurnals are. How hot does it get, and what is it? What is the low that day? And by the time we're harvesting Merlot in late September, even early October, we can still be in the 80s, maybe even towards 90, most likely 80s. But at night, we're starting to bump frost line. So we're seeing 40 and 50-point swings in one day. And I always like to compare that to having a large refrigerator that we get to put our fruit in to keep our fruit nice and fresh. So that's that. It adds in, Steve mentioned again, it was about acidity, or retaining some of that beautiful acidity that creates the freshness in our wines. And then the soil is kind of the fourth leg of what we speak to. And that is, we thank Canada for all their ground up granite and stone, and having these Missoula floods that, if you know anything about geography and history, there's 90 of these great floods that deposited our soil in Washington State, and even into all the way to the coast of Oregon. So we were at the bottom of a 1,000-foot lake for thousands and thousands and thousands of years. So our soil is actually quite consistent. It's a sandy ward and loam in most cases, and just variations of loess soil. So very porous, so very little water, very porous soils. Again, we get to control the vigor of the vine. So I think that's the most important thing to remember about where we get to grow grapes. And it doesn't make it better. I'm always very careful to say that. It's just our unique experience in growing the grapes in Washington State.
Yeah, and see a comment there from Richard Kwan about how I will put this deck on this chat box for everybody to take a look at eventually here, and you can grab the URL and take a look at it later. But it's a great photo to kind of really put perspective on things that I don't think most people think about. And I think you're right. People think of Seattle, think of all those trees, they think of vampire movies.
Exactly.
All right. The Twilight fans out there, right?
Right.
Okay, let's go on to the next slide and take a look. I didn't get to comment earlier when we were talking about this picture, but I love this perspective and looking down on, is that a lake down there?
Below there is the Columbia River where it naturally free runs. Columbia River has essentially, I think, 19 or so dams, so it's become a series of lakes. But right below this particular vineyard is the longest stretch of undammed Columbia River, so it's quite wild below there. And this is a vineyard. This is the vineyard my dad moved to Washington in 1975 to manage. We were Californians. We had a small farm in Atwater, California, and Dad came up to Washington to manage this vineyard called Bacchus of Dionysus, the Greek and Roman wine gods. And we lived above this vineyard for the first 6 or so years in Washington State. During a very nascent time of Washington, in 1975, this was a 400-acre planting of grapes, so it was the largest single planting of vinifera grapes in Washington at the time, and represented not almost half of all the vineyards planted in Washington. And if you fast forward to today, there's about 60,000 acres in the ground. So this was a huge planting and a huge undertaking for my father in 75. And then he went on to start the winery in 1983.
Let's talk about what's happening in the glass here, because I'm seeing some comments on about the style and stuff, and we've definitely kind of straddled an old world entering a new world style where we've got a little higher, firmer acidity, maybe a lower pH, and a little less of a fruit orientation, more earth orientation, and really some very pretty use of wood, but not intrusive use of wood.
Yeah, I think it starts in the vineyards, of course, and our yields are naturally fairly low, given our climate. We get plenty of sunshine, but the heat starts dissipating, of course, pretty quickly towards the tail end of the season. So our yields, typically around 3 to 4 tons an acre, which is classic for the two vineyards that really drive this, which is Connerly and Dionysus. It's actually a combination of hand and machine picked by Poulenc, by French harvesters, mechanical harvesters. And then it's all fermented in 2 to 4 ton open top fermenters. Typically, it might see a tank with a closed top, but mostly open top. Mm-hmm. And then everything we do is gently rolled over with oxygen. We don't use by hand pretty much anymore. It's all oxygen rolled over. We do use cultivated yeast. The wines naturally go through ML in barrel, and they finish primary and secondary fermentation in barrel. So when we come out of the press tank, we go straight to barrels, which in our case are 340 and 350 liter barrels if they're new, roughly 70% new French oak, and a smaller amount of 1 and 2 filled barrels. And I think the whole idea is that over the years I've been making wine for 25 years, is I really want to show you the provenance of the vineyard and the vintage and where we get to grow grapes. It's not my job to show you where I was purchasing barrels recently. So that's why I like the idea of larger format barrels, aged surly, so we have great oxygen O2, where I have some oxygen exchange. Actually, the staves are thicker on barrels. So the wines are made really anaerobically, and I think there's a freshness in the wines. And of course, you allowed me to cheat a little bit by bringing this wine, because it is only 70% Merlot, just 5% the federal standards for calling it a Merlot, with 20%, 25% Cab and 5% Petit Verdot. So the blending also is a big part of what we do. We joke that we're blendaholics in Washington because we definitely nod to the right and left bank of Bordeaux in terms of the varieties we grow and how we blend. Although we don't consider ourselves there, we're not trying to duplicate them. I think we're a new world version of an old world style in many cases.
Yeah, the label doesn't say Merlot on it directly at all. It just says conflict.
Yeah, just on the back label is where we divulge the blends.
Sure. And that's how you're allowed to make a wine that's not necessarily labeled by the varietal, but it's got the name and then the blend on the back, very much like a Bordeaux model as well.
Yeah, all the names are literary. It didn't take a genius. The last name like Bookwalter to come up with a literary format and theme for all of our wines and restaurants. So everything you see, conflict, protagonist, suspense, all those are labels of ours. And conflict's been Merlot for us in this particular blend. And this has since 2007. It was our first of this style.
Cool. So we look at the vineyard definitions here about elevation, when they're planted, their location in the AVA, different. How much total acreage are we talking about here?
Well, we work with roughly 300 to 350 acres. I don't own all of our vineyards, so we contract a fair amount. But we've been, because my dad had managed both the primary vineyards that source for this wine. So we've been in those blocks literally since the 70s and early 80s when they were planted. So we've had them the same blocks continually in our cellar for all these years, and in particular in this particular wine.
Good shot.
Yeah, and all of our winemaking, a lot of it's been influenced over the years with consultants. Completely agree with Steve that more heads that wrap and palates that wrap their themselves around wine. I think that helps bring perspective. And I had two great winemakers to help kind of model our wines, and Zelma Long and Claude Gros. And I won't go into their backgrounds, but I know we're short for time. But if you Google who they are, they're amazing winemakers and in their own right, and certainly pretty impactful. Certainly Zelma's impact on California's significant.
For sure. She's impacted all over the world, for sure. And another great shot looking at the vineyards and the conditions there. Really pretty spectacular up there. And we're talking about high desert, right? Is that what it would be considered?
Yeah, the Columbia Valley's high plains, if you will. So it's very, the elevation doesn't really, where we really grow grapes probably averages 600 to 800-foot elevation. So but it's a high desert, absolutely. So very little rain and great soils for growing grapes and anything else other than citrus for that.
Well, here's the breakdown of the wine. Again, carrying that Columbia Valley AVA in Washington. And we're seeing here in California, I'm in Los Angeles talking to you all. But we are seeing growth of Washington wines in California, which is pretty tough because we make so much wine here in California. So we're probably not your first market. What is, besides Washington and Oregon, where else do you have great success with your wine?
Florida and Texas. Anywhere where people enjoy wine, we do well. The Southeast in particular seems to be a hot spot for us, and North Central or North Midwest, like Minnesota, Wisconsin. It's pockets, it's all about, if distribution, it's where you have champions for your wines and for your category. And there's some places where we over-index, and California is not one, as you know. You guys do. California makes so many great wines. It's tough but it's also a great market because people appreciate wines from all over. So in that regard, it's a great market.
Sure. Well, you're with a very good broker down here, broker distributor. He's a really nice man. He represents you well.
Great. Thanks, Ian.
Your contribution to the auction is on that link I provided. We've got the Conflict Connor Lee Vineyard in Magnum, 2018. And if you get up into this area, Columbia Valley, this is a look at the winery. It looks like you have a pretty nice hospitality program there.
We do our best.
Well, thank you for joining us today.
Yeah, thanks, Ian.
Fantastic. I hope everyone's feeling good, and we've got a couple of wines in us. Any questions that I didn't get to read out loud or see on there? Anyone want to make a comment about the wine? It's definitely maybe something a little different for you guys to be able to taste wine from Washington and compare it to a California version. It's okay to be honest and tell us what you think. Sometimes it hurts, sometimes it makes us smile. We got some comments coming in now. All let's go back into it and see the gallery. And thank you very much, John. I'll take off the pressure there and put the pressure back on myself. All right. Glad you folks enjoyed that wine. I really do as well, and it's got a wonderful balance and flavor profile. Not too ripe. What was that finished alcohol though? It carries alcohol close to 14.7, I think you said.
Yeah, 14. I think I put 14.8 on the label. I'll be honest, it's probably closer to 15.2. Again, alcohol, that's we said earlier in the other conferences, that it's all part of balance. Whether if it stands out, that's not a good thing, but within fruit, tannin, and acidity context, I think the wine balances.
Outstanding. Well, thank you guys for the comments in the chat, and if you have any others for John or anyone else that are reading and looking forward to hearing from you, please take advantage of that when you can. We're going to move into wine number 3, and we're going to go back down into Monterey, Carmel Valley, and we're going to hang out with Bernardus and Jim McCabe. The winemaker is with us. Jim, are you out there?
I'm here. Good evening, everybody. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir. Thank you so much. How are you doing?
All right. Hanging in there. Hanging in there. Thanks for having me.
Are you done with harvest there?
No, we are actually picking our Merlot, our 2022 Merlot tomorrow.
Wow.
So we're late harvest. We're in a cool area. We face some of the same challenges that Steve was talking about earlier. It's a cool place for growing Merlot and kind of Bordeaux style varieties. So generally, we would like to make sure our grapes are physiologically ripe and ready to go before we pick them. That means we might deal with some raisoning and pH is going up, but that's one of the strategies we use to create this Merlot kind of fruit forward. And as again referencing McIntyre's wines, we also try to deal with trying to coax more fruit out of the wine and less of that green vegetated note that it can be common in cooler areas, especially with Merlot calves and that like.
The way the crow flies, how far away are we in Carmel Valley to where we were in Arroyo Seco?
Ooh, okay. So that picture we're looking at right now, that is one of the Francione vineyards. And Arroyo Seco is Arroyo Seco Road, approximately 10 miles from there. Okay. And then we are located, our winery and estate vineyards are located right over those mountains that you can see in the background there. So we're right on the other side of that.
So not that far, but probably takes a while.
Not too far, but it's going to take you about an hour to get there. So yeah, winery itself is probably about 15 miles from that site, but you have to go all the way around to get there. Yep.
And yeah, because we're very close by. You can see Carmel, Monterey, Santa Lucia as kind of landmarks.
Yeah.
Big Sur beach area gets a lot of tourism. So does Carmel as well.
So we're located almost where that A in the AVA is, right down there.
Got it.
So that's where we are.
That's good.
Yeah, across the mountains. Yeah, so I'm from Bernardus Winery. As Ian was saying, we're in Carmel Valley. We're primarily known for Chardonnay and Pinot production, but we do make some Bordeaux style varietals. We do like a blend. This is one of the components. The Merlot was one of the components that was going into that Bordeaux style blend. We had some extra Merlot, and we were looking for a good way to create kind of a by the glass program, an extra SKU for our wine club members, and something to present in restaurants and in our tasting room. We make about 800 cases of this Merlot, depending on the year, depending on weather conditions and crop yields. where we're aiming for kind of a very approachable, fruit forward, maybe a little bit on the lighter side. We're not looking to have a huge tannic expression. We're trying to keep it kind of light, fruity, low tannins. And one of the ways we achieve that is by cool fermentations. That seems to help us express the fruity esters that are natural to the Merlot. This is 100% Merlot. We're not blending this with anything else at this point. We're just getting ready to pick our 2022. This is fermented in stainless steel and then aged in French and a little bit of Hungarian oak.
How long?
So the Merlot is aged for approximately 8 months. And then our Bordeaux style will stay in barrel. So we'll take this out of barrel and bottle it separately, and then we'll keep the things for our boat or our blend, and that will age for another approximately 6 to 8 months before we rack that, blend it, and bottle it.
Cool. This bottling is under Stelvin closure, and
That's right.
do you think that actually helps improve the freshness of the wine? And is that why you pick that closure?
Yeah, so that's an interesting thing. So some people think that screw caps can be a little reductive. We're hoping people drink this a little younger, and so that the effect of the possible reductive effect of the Stelvin closure won't be as impactful. Because we're putting this out young, we're hoping that it retains the fruity esters and retains everything that we bottled it with. So for our Bordeaux style blend, we bottle it with natural cork, and we're hoping for that interplay of oxygen and aging. Those wines we will kind of cellar down for a few years before release, while this Merlot is bottled, kind of allowed to age for 3 to 6 months and then released.
14.1 alcohol. And take a look at that label, everybody. If you don't know this brand, the founder of the brand, Bernard Pond, was a Dutchman. I say was because he passed away a few years ago. But he was older and had a very good plan. And the ownership of the brand passed on to another family. But Mr. Pond's legacy is pretty important. The Pond family actually lent money to Porsche to rebuild the Porsche factory, and that's why the Pond family mark is on every Porsche car. You might recognize it there. And the Bernardus hotel chain around the world was founded by him. So a lot of these wines were actually established for the Bernardus hotels and resorts worldwide. And family is incredibly generous and supportive of education, and really makes some dramatic and beautiful wines that you don't always see out there in the retail markets, but you might find them more in the luxury hotel segment.
Yeah, you'll see our Chardonnay and our Pinot, some of our larger production wines, but something like the Merlot, we usually keep local restaurants. Like I said, our tasting room wine club. This is a smaller production wine, so yeah, you're not going to see this out too far in the wider world.
And with the new family coming in, there's some new ideas in labeling and stuff. So keep your eyes open for some changes in the Bernardus future, because it's all starting to take that next generational step.
Yeah, they're looking for growth and a little bit of modernization. They're also a Dutch family that owns a winery, and they're looking to grow in Europe. They're looking for some emerging markets in Belgium, and they're also looking to Asia to expand into there. So.
Great.
Yeah.
Good job, security.
Good job, security. Excellent. Yeah.
Well, thank you very much for presenting this beautiful Merlot. And Bernardus has provided their marquee wine called Moranus, which is the Bordeaux blend and ages beautifully. And they've got a Magnum of 2017 on the auction site. So if you are interested in jumping on that, that first bidder probably gets the best shot at the best price. Those prices don't come down. So get in there early and establish your bid, and be outbid if you can. Thank you, Mr. McCabe. Good to see you again, sir.
Thank you, Ian.
Joel Peterson, the legend, is with us tonight. Joel, I just want to thank you for being with us. You were the first winery to sign up, and I said, this event's going to be great. So thank you so much. I'm going to unmute you now because I put this like strangulation mute on everybody earlier, I found out.
Have you found me? I am among the masses.
Yeah, you are now spotlit. And tell us about your wine career and bring us up to speed where we're at here, Joel.
Well, I've been making wine for a long time, as you know, Ian. I think this is my 50th year. I started with Joe Swan in 1972 and learned how to make wine in a fairly simple and primitive way. I started a little winery called Ravenswood in 1976 and made a whopping 437 cases of wine. Somehow that project got out of control, and before we knew it, it was well into the close to 1 million case stage. But in 2014, I just decided that I didn't want to be part of a big winery anymore. And I had worked for Constellation. They bought the winery in 2001. So I'd worked for them for almost 16 years. And so I said, what do you really love about the wine business? What you really love about the wine business is making wine. And when you run a big winery, you tell other people how to make wine. You don't actually get in there and do it yourself as much as you'd love to. And of course, you have to sell wine too. So I spent a lot of time on the road and less time doing what I really liked about the wine business, which was making wine. So in to go back to this wine for a moment, in 1981, I moved the winery to the Carneros. I ended up in a little tin building at the edge of the San Giacomo vineyard. And the San Giacomo family was really kind to me and allowed me to use their equipment. I had no equipment to speak of, no forklift, anything else. Really, I had no business making wine other than I loved making wine and I knew a lot about wine. And they grew mostly Pinot Noir and Chardonnay, but it turned out they grew a little Pinot Noir in this vineyard called the Keyser Vineyard, which is right in the direct airflow pattern of the Petaluma Gap. So like the Monterey wines we've been tasting, it has a high diurnal variation. It has a real marine influence. So you get moderately warm days and quite cool nights. Sometimes the mornings are very foggy. And it's perfect for Pinot Noir and Chardonnay, but it's marginal for Merlot, which is exactly what you want. You want Bordeaux varieties to be growing in a marginal area. That way you get the longer hang time, you get much more definitive flavors and really good character out of the wines. So if you want to flip to the next slide, that man in the middle there is Angelo San Giacomo, and he's kind of a legend around Sonoma. They used to grow pears, but when the pear business went down, they started planting Chardonnay. And when I moved there to work right next to his vineyard in 1981, that young man you see on the left-hand side is my son, and he was 5 years old. And Angelo kind of took him under his wing and taught him about how grapes grow and gave him some Pinot Noir. And we made a Pinot Noir for like 15 years until he went off to college. And now he has a vineyard called Bedrock Vineyards. So he's a master of wine. So Angelo really changed the world for him. This particular planting of Merlot was a little odd. It was actually planted for Matanzas Creek Winery when Dave Ramey was the winemaker there. And he was also looking for a marginal spot for growing Pinot Noir. The clone is kind of a mysterious suitcase clone, supposedly came in from a famous vineyard. Nobody's talking about which famous vineyard, but we can all make assumptions. It is a vineyard that's on VSP trellising. And because it's in the wind pattern of the Carneros, and that wind comes just when the fruit is flowering, there's a lot of shatter, meaning that some of the flowers don't fertilize correctly. And so you get very stringy clusters with fewer berries on them. That created some problems initially because the crop levels were too low. And we had to figure out a way to increase the crop levels because the leaf to fruit level was not correct. And as a consequence, you get these various sort of jalapeno-y wines. But we seem to have solved that by actually putting more fruit on the vine. The wines are made very simply, small open top fermenters punched down by hand, native yeast fermentations. I get to do all the work now. It's great fun, I have to say. I like getting dirty. You can see this is actually the 2022 Merlot San Giacomo Merlot that I'm digging out here. You can see what great color it has coming out of the fermenter. You want to push the button one more time, Ian? You can see me doing my labor of love, as it were. Tossing the grapes into a bin, which will send it off to the press. But the idea with this particular wine is and with all the wines I make, is to give you the sense of place. So there's a fair amount of extended maceration on these wines, which accounts for some of the structural characteristics. And these wines last for a very long time. I opened up a bottle of the 89 I made, which was the first year I made this wine. And it's delicious. It's really quite good. So it's in many ways the ideal place for growing Merlot. You end up with low pHs. I think this wine has a pH of 327, if I recall. The alcohol is about 14.3. We age it in French oak. It's about 25% new. We do a bit of Swirl on this wine. So this wine goes into the barrel with the light lees. So those lees are always with the wine. It gives the wine a slightly more creamy character. It's bottled after 18 months in barrel. And really quite simple. One of the other things that the Swirl aspect does for you is it helps you keep the sulfur levels in the wine down because it's reductive, and as a consequence, oxygen doesn't affect the wine as much as it might otherwise. So
they're actually eating the oxygen or absorbing the oxygen, right?
Yes, that's exactly what's happening. So I get to make wines for myself now. People talked about winemaking as a group effort. I'm the correlate, like the anti to that. I made wine by group effort for a long time, and that's a great way to make wine. But now I get to make wines for myself. So this wine is a wine that I actually like because it's transparent. You can sort of feel the kind of the character within the wine, and there's a lot of little subtleties going on, and it just feels interesting and it's fun to drink. So that's my story, and I'm sticking to it.
441 cases, a label that's got a familiar feel because it's done by the same artist that did the Ravenswood label. David Lance Goins, a really famous LA or a San Francisco Bay Area, Oakland based artist, right?
Yes, Berkeley-based artist. He was Mario Savio's right-hand man in the Berkeley free speech movement. And he was Alice Waters' boyfriend when I first met him at Chez Panisse. And he's an excellent, excellent artist, makes these amazing posters, did a lot of the early artwork for Chez Panisse. And he did the early Ravenswood label, which was a circle of ravens, which turned out to be the most tattooed wine logo in the world. I think I saw 100 wine logos tattooed on people's bodies. I learned when I was out in the market that if people came up to me and said, "I've got something I want to show you," that was code for "I'm taking my clothes off now."
That's a great story. Oh, very cool. Very cool. It's so great to taste with you and to hear your story. I could hear it 1,000 times and 1,000 times more. So keep up the good work and keep making wine, because lifting all those shovels will keep you young.
Thank you, Ian. I am a lucky man. I get to do what I love to do, and other people seem to love it as well. So the world doesn't get a whole lot better than that.
Sounds great. Cheers to you, my friend. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
And we've got a special bottle of Ravenswood Merlot San Giacomo Vineyard, 1995, out of Magnum on the auction. How cool is that?
So, not only is it cool, but it's delicious. I opened up a bottle of this just to make sure that, I wasn't sending you a bum. And I had 8 people with me, and that bottle vanished as if it were $3.75.
Oh, beautiful. Well, those larger bottles, those Magnums, slow things down and really make wine just a little bit better. Just not because there's more, but slows it down. And really, I love having Magnums, so it's a great idea. Well, thank you very much, and let's power on with our foyer into great Merlot. We're now crossing over the Miamis and going into Napa Valley to join Sullivan Rutherford Estate. And we've got both the winemaker Jeff Cole and Lisa Barker.
Hi, Ian. Thanks for having us. Good to see you again. Guys. It's been a while.
There we go. Yeah, we do this earlier in the day, work the kinks out for our presentation by going in and talking to the wine buyers of the world, the restaurateurs and wine shop owners, and so we did that earlier today. So if we seem like we're slightly rehearsed, hopefully we do anyway. This is us slightly rehearsed. Let's put it that way.
Just slightly.
Yeah. Well, again, if anybody wants to comment or have any things to say in there, please continue to chat it up. And we are moving now into wine number 5, and let's get it going on. Lisa, are you gonna get us started here?
Sure. Do we still have time for the video, or do you want to jump right into it? I don't know how people are feeling.
Show the video.
Okay. Well, let's let it roll.
Yeah.
Let it rip.
You're good at talking right over the top of it anyway.
Yes, sir. Great. So hi, everybody. My name's Lisa Barker. I'm the estate director at Sullivan Rutherford Estate. We're in the heart of the Napa Valley in Rutherford. This video that is, I don't know how well it's coming up for you guys, just shows where we are and just shows our property. We're on 26 acres on the valley floor, 22 planted. And in addition to this bit of property, we've recently purchased a parcel up in St. Helena that is planted to 8 acres of Cabernet Sauvignon. And we also bought a virgin property down in Soda Canyon, south of Stag's Leap off Silverado Trail, which we planted ourselves, which is a fortunate thing for us. And a lot of it was with a healthy whack of Merlot. We are thrilled to be celebrating our 50th anniversary this year in 2022. And in all of those 50 years, we cannot claim, as Joel can, that we have the most tattooed logo, but we still are very proud of producing some wonderful wines. And when James O'Neill Sullivan first purchased the property and started planting in 1972, a lot of what he did was a healthy whack of Merlot on the property. And as trends changed and the marketplace changed, more and more Cabernet was planted. But we are now going back, and as we've had to tear out some vines and replant, we're doing another healthy whack of Merlot. And with this slide, again, we're celebrating our 50th anniversary, but one of the things we're most proud of is, and as the Rob Report article that you can see, is that we're really championing Merlot. And we love that. Thanks for the star. We love that you guys are joining us, because obviously you guys are fans and champions of Merlot, and everybody on this panel. And so we're just happy to be in such great company. And we know that it's just, one of the noble grapes, one of the best varietals. And if you give it the care and attention that it deserves, it stands head and shoulders to, Cabernet. And that's a big statement from a winery that's in the heart of quote unquote cab country in Napa Valley. But enough about all of that. I'm going to let Jeff Cole, our winemaker, tell you every single detail about our delicious Merlot that you guys have tonight. Thanks, guys.
Thank you. And just Jeff, before you jump in,
Sure.
The Sullivan Winery is just absolutely beautiful, and it's a place where I recommend everybody make a visit to. There's a lot going on there, a lot of new energy, new investment, but a really beautiful set of bones that you guys have to start off with here. And it's a gorgeous, gorgeous facility, absolutely in impeccable shape. You guys have rehabilitated the whole place. It's looking so good.
Yeah, I mean, I like to say it's a little oasis on the valley floor. I mean, you think of some of these estates in Napa up in the hills and the foothills, and, with the magnificent views of not only the valley, but the vineyards. And you don't really think of the Rutherford Valley floor as being this picturesque estate, but it absolutely is. And we're kind of off the beaten path that can even happen, being really right in the middle of the Napa Valley. But once you find us and you get back there, I mean, Jim Sullivan back in 1972, he had a vision, and he laid, as you said, the kind of the foundation and the groundwork for now this new kind of generation to come in and build upon it. And I think that's exactly what we've done. And so, 1972, Jim Sullivan came up from LA with his family. He was a graphic designer. That was his original occupation and trade. And really around that time, this place up in Northern California was kind of gaining some steam. And, people were hearing that some good wines were being made up in the Napa Valley. And Jim was a big proponent of wine. He made wine in his garage. I think one of his wedding gifts was a grapevine that he planted and cultivated, and used a little bit of that fruit to make wine in a carboy type of thing, and really just had a passion for it. And so, once he heard about the Napa Valley, and obviously back then things were a little cheaper, it was easier to get in and buy land and kind of switch gears, and that's exactly what he did. He enlisted the help of Andre Telitchev, who was the winemaker at Bulio Vineyards, which is BV. You've probably seen those labels in many stores. And they're rather large company, but at the time, Andre Telitchev was the winemaker, and Jim Sullivan developed a relationship with him and enlisted him to help him find a plot of land that would allow him to make big, structured, age-worthy wines. And so they located this 26 acres, kind of in the northern, northern portion of the Rutherford Appellation. And they found these 26 acres that are sitting, even though it's the valley floor, there's a little bit of this rise, and they identified that. And that was because there was a high deposit of gravel that had come down off the mountainside. The Napa Valley, the Napa River is just to our east. So, over the many thousands of years of that river carving its way through the valley, deposited a high amount of gravel on this site. And anybody that makes wine or knows about growing grapes, I mean, that's what you look for in reality. I mean, gravel, sand, a little bit of loam. There's not very much clay. So water just drains away, and that's ideal for high-end red wine production, primarily Cabernet and Merlot. I mean, you want the vines to stress and really, have to struggle to produce a crop, to ripen the crop, because when you don't have a lot of fertility, the berries tend to be a lot smaller. When you have smaller berries, naturally you have the ability to extract and concentrate more, because your skin to juice ratio is much higher. And that's, all the good stuff, all the phenolics, the color, the tannin, all the goodness that comes in your wine comes from the skins. And so when you have more skin to juice, you just have the ability to really concentrate all that in the smaller volume, thus producing, bigger extracted age-worthy wines. And Jim recognized that, and it was kind of a no-brainer for him. So he set up shop, planted, as Lisa said, a high amount of Merlot, obviously some Cabernet. Back then, they were still trying to figure out what grew best where. So there was a little bit of Chardonnay and Chenin Blanc, but then as time went on, the white varieties were replanted with more Merlot and obviously Cabernet Sauvignon. And really, what put Sullivan on the map, I believe, was the '89 vintage Merlot. So that was released in '92, and it was in Wine Spectator's top 100 wines of the world that year. And so really that kind of shoved or really put Sullivan into the forefront, and with Merlot, right? And you don't really hear about that a whole lot in Napa, being as Cab is most widely produced there. But the fact that Merlot was in at the beginning, now flash forward 45 years, 50 years, I guess we're celebrating 50 years, is, it's in our heritage, and this is what we do. And for me, this is the 2022 vintage is my 10th vintage on the estate. So I think, at least I like to think I know, what the property is capable of, and it's capable of a lot. And what we found just in my time at Sullivan is that if you obviously plant the fruit in really good soil and you give it a lot of attention from the growing side, so from the viticulture side, and you give it a lot of attention and detail and focus on the winemaking side, you can make some pretty darn good wines. And I think what gets lost, being from the Napa Valley and this whole just this whole movement into the Cabernet over the last 25 years, is Merlot kind of took a back seat, and all the best soils, all the best sites were planted to Cabernet, and all the kind of the mediocre, lesser soils, if you would, that would produce quality Cab were planted to everything else. And so Merlot kind of took the brunt of that. And when you plant Merlot in inferior soils, you don't give it the attention it deserves, that you're going to make mediocre or less than stellar wines. And I think Merlot kind of, has that rap that, at least in the Napa Valley, that it's a blending wine. It's to tone some of these Cabernets down. We're going to put it in a blend, and you just kind of forget about it. And we're taking the opposite approach, because we want Merlot to have this renaissance, to come back to its greatness, to be considered as good or better than some of the elite Cabernets that are coming out of the Napa Valley. And so that's our approach. That's my winemaking approach. I'm sure you folks have dived in and taken a smell and taken a nice swig of it, if you will, and you'll see. I mean, this is a serious wine. We're in the valley, or the Napa Valley, so it gets warm there. So we obviously get ripeness, but we're situated in such a place that, everybody's talking about these diurnal changes from day to night, and we get that same effect. We are situated in such a place that in the summertime, are really like clockwork, around 2:30, 3 o'clock in the afternoon, we get this breeze that comes in off the San Pablo Bay, and it works its way up the valley and really finds us and cools everything off. And so even though you have these warm afternoons, by the time night falls, you'll drop 20 degrees and it'll cool things off. It preserves freshness and the acidity. It allows the vines to kind of take a breath from dealing with some of the heat that it had to the afternoon before. And so really it allows me to make balanced wines. And I think a lot of times in Napa, people can get away from that. They can get a little overly ripe, and you get tannins that are so resolved that they're almost non-existent, and you have high pHs and low acidity, and so you get what I call these really dollopy wines. And I don't know if it's, well, it is, I know, the site, but also before I was at Sullivan, I spent 7 years at Schramsberg Vineyards, which is the sparkling wine producer. And so I have an affinity for acidity. Like, I like acid. Acid's great. And so trying to incorporate, my background in sparkling to what Napa has to offer from a red wine perspective, I try to marry those two. So yes, the wine is going to be big and rich and complex and dense and great tannin. There's also a sense of acidity that kind of ties it all together, keeps it fresh, and just makes it very delightful. And so these wines, or this wine specifically, is age worthy. I mean, and that's what it's built to do. I mean, yeah, it's great now, 2019. We released this, I think, maybe 6 months ago, but it's got a lot of time to go, and it's phenomenal. And it really, as these wines age 5, 6, 7, 8 years down the road, is really when they start hitting their prime, and when the tannins resolve, and you just get this really oily, rich, dense, just luscious deliciousness coming out of the bottle. And so anyway, we're super proud of the Merlot. As Lisa said, we're championing it. We're putting our best effort towards this variety and trying to really bring it back to the forefront, out in the public's eye, and really get it on par with some of the other varieties being produced, and also from a quality perspective, getting it up there so it's taken seriously.
And I think earlier when we were talking, you made a pretty good point about how, Cabernet becomes so important that all the best sites get planted to Cab, and then all of a sudden, Merlot kind of gets what's left over, and you're going to get wines that kind of result from that too. Exactly. And what you guys are fighting for is putting some Merlot in some of your best sites as well. And
as Lisa said, we on the Rutherford property, we ripped out 2 years ago, I think almost 9 acres of Cabernet, primarily Cabernet, on very high concentration of gravel soils. I mean, when you look at the ground, you're like, in Napa, Cabernet is going there, and we're like, no, we're planting Merlot, not only because we want to produce, rich, complex, dense, age-worthy wines, but also because that's what Jim Sullivan did 45 years ago. And we want to bring that back kind of from a historical perspective, but with a modern twist on it, with modern, education, technology, growing practices, and really, achieve, I think, what Jim Sullivan back in 1972 had envisioned. And I think we're obviously taking the right steps to get there, but I think the wines are starting to reach that level, and it's nothing but up for us from here.
As far as the oak is going, we're talking about a mixture of smaller and larger wood barrel, 100% French oak, and really, making a showcase wine, and putting it out there for the world to see that this is a brand that's taking the Merlot stance very seriously. And I thank you for joining our Merlot discussion tonight. The Sullivan Rutherford Estate has a Cabernet Magnum 2017 valued at $300 on the auction. So thank you very much for putting such a wonderful auction item forward. And to all the wineries that did that, really, really appreciate that. And I hope, I'm not sure if all the winemakers are on the Zoom to participate in the blind tasting, but I'd love to get to that and see if anyone wants to play along with us. And Lisa and Jeff, thank you very much. Any closing marks you want to make?
No, thanks everybody for showing up. This is fun.
Thanks, Ian, for bringing us all together again. And thank you everybody on here for being Merlot enthusiasts as well. We're happy to have you. You're the right audience to speak to.
That's great. Thank you, Lisa. And if any of you want to visit any of the wineries that we talked to today, hope you'll take advantage of your connection with us. Maybe go to the wineries or come to us and let us help you with your next visit to the Napa, Sonoma, Carmel, even Washington. It's a great destination. We all love to travel. We all love to eat. And we all come with a lot of suggestions. So take advantage of our resources. This last wine is in the glass, and I just wanted to kind of conclude tonight with a little fun tasting of a blind wine. So the guessing game begins now. I'd love to hear some comments. Don't go straight to your guess yet, but just smell the wine and tell me what you smell. And, Merlot has got a lot of different references. It's planted all over the world, and there's some fantastic examples in places like Tuscany, where wines like Massetto sell for $1,000 a bottle, and they're 100% Merlot. Like Bordeaux, where the right bank is mostly Merlot and the left bank is mostly Merlot. Believe it or not, the Bordeaux business isn't necessarily a Cabernet-based business. It's a Merlot and Cabernet-based business, and Merlot is the larger of the two in total planting there in Bordeaux. It tends to not always get the showcase position in the thoughts and minds of the consumer, because the most expensive wines on the left bank may be dominated by Cabernet, but the right bank is absolutely dominated by Merlot. We could go to Chile and smell and taste great wines made from Merlot, or Argentina. There's Merlots being made in the gimlet gravels of New Zealand. Really beautiful Bordeaux style Merlots. Of course, we've got Washington, California. There's some fantastic wines being made in Baja, Mexico, and even parts of Australia. So, and there are many places I didn't mention. Canada, the west or the east coast of America. I was in Charlottesville, West Virginia, and had a Malbec and Merlot blend recently that was really delicious. The comments that are coming in, Gia says anise, thyme, herbal. Very good, very good. And you can smell a lot of different things in this wine. It's certainly not the ripe expression that we might get here in California. So we're going to take California off the board. And where else could it be from? And if anyone wants to come on and come off of mute, please help yourself and come on in. I'm going to spend just a second to get the slide up to show you the wine that we're tasting right now. Have the answer waiting for us. We've got Spain as a guess. Probably not the first guess I would have made there, Jen and Josh. Spain can and does make some Bordeaux style blends, and there's grapes planted everywhere in Bordeaux. Spain was Josh. She wants to point out that Josh said Spain. I love you guys. That's so good. Jen says France.
There you go. There you go, Jen.
Okay, good. Yeah, so we are in Bordeaux, and we're tasting a little wine called Chateau Lanode. And this is a northern, it's north of Saint-Emilion. and a little garage east type of producer. 18.5 hectares planted, Merlot, Cabernet, Cab Franc. It is 60 Merlot, 30 Cab, and 10 Cab Franc. Very consistent with what they do on the right bank. Here's a little picture of that valley. Barrel details 100% stainless steel. Probably a good amount of lees time, and their soils are chalk, clay, and limestone, and that's why Merlot is pretty prevalent on the right bank, because of all the clay. And Cabernet doesn't like clay, but on the right bank of Bordeaux, the clay can be planted to Merlot, and that's what they have achieved there. It's a wonderful little bottle of wine for less than 20 bucks. I purchased quite a bit of it with a great 15 and 16 vintage. Now we're of course seeing the 19s coming around, but I took a pretty big wallop of this value-oriented Bordeaux because I liked it and thought it would be great for a few years. It's still there and still in good shape, and getting a little less available out there. I'm one of the few places that still have this 15, but I think it's a wonderful little value-oriented wine, and I wanted to conclude our tasting with that wine. I hope you enjoyed it. Good job, Jen. Sorry, Josh. Jen got you. To all of you that are...
That's why I married her.
Ah, that's great. Good comeback. Well, I wanted to conclude our session today with a little commercial for any of you that are in the LA area. And those of you that aren't, go into our Zoom into Wine page where we host our upcoming events, and you can see all the different Zooms that we have. This is our Zoom into Wine page here. And next week, we've got some events happening with Beaujolais on the 2nd. We've got Alsace on the 9th. And then we take a week off because in LA, we host a major event called the Stars of Cabernet. And we've got an incredible list of wineries coming out. The future Zooms after that, the 23rd, I start these single bottle Zooms because I will be traveling in Europe and I want my team to be able to succeed. So if you want to get involved, for $30, we'll send you a bottle of ice wine. The week after that, a great bottle of Barsac Doisy Dane for 40 bucks. A week after that, a 15-year-old Malmsey Madeira for 50 bucks. And so the whole bottle will show up to your place, and we'll talk about that on Zoom. And then in the middle of December, we have our Stars of French Wine, where we take a really crazy swath of some of the top wines of France. Come back and check out the list there. We'll be announcing that in November. And the calendar continues. We are cross-pollinating our calendar from Merchant of Wine and learnaboutwine.com. If you go to Learn About Wine, you'll see our calendar here as well, and it's very similar with some of the activities that we have going on, and some of them in the near term here are sold out, but we keep producing wonderful content, and we want to keep you involved. So thanks for being here tonight, and we hope to see you all again very soon. On behalf of Learn About Wine and Merchant of Wine, there's an email that came into you tonight with a little discount code if you want to pick up any wines at the Merchant of Wine. We have free delivery in Los Angeles, $10 delivery available in California, and we ship at cost nationwide wherever it's legal. Thank you guys for joining us and for all the comments that you guys had. Appreciate the praise, the critique. If you have any comments, you're welcome to email me at ian@learnaboutwine.com, and we hope to see you all again. Thanks, guys. Thanks all the winemakers for participating. And use hashtag MerlotMe and post a little picture tonight and at Learn About Wine, and we'll see it and we'll repost it. Thanks all. Join us on Instagram. Cheers, everybody.